All right, let's evaluate this limit. In this case, we have x approaching 0. You'll notice that we have a square root involved, which makes this one a little bit unique. So as we get going, the very first thing, if you have x approaching a specific value, is you want to evaluate the expression by replacing x with whatever value it's approaching. So we'll start out in the numerator and say 5 times 0 plus 16 with a minus 4 outside, and then 0 replaces the x in the denominator as well. Next, let's go ahead and just simplify this down a little bit. Well, underneath that square root, I think we can say 5 times 0 is 0, plus 16 gives us 16, with a minus 4 out here, which continues to break down to 4 minus 4 in our numerator, which eventually gets us to 0 over 0. So in this case, because we got to 0 over 0, what that tells us is go ahead and keep going. We don't want to stop here, but if you did end up with, say, 0 in the numerator and some different number in the denominator, you could stop there and say, well, 0 divided by a number is 0. Or if they were both numbers that weren't 0, you could stop there. If you have some number in the numerator, but you end up dividing by 0, we'd say that's not defined. The next thing I want to do is I want to approach this by focusing on our radical. Because we have a radical in the numerator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by the conjugate of that numerator. Now, if you only had a radical, or you did have a radical, let's say in the denominator, even if you have one also in the numerator, I would focus on the denominator. And the conjugate is going to be, you take the same two terms, 5x plus 16, and the 4, and the same thing's going to happen with our denominator, right? Because we're multiplying both numerator and denominator by the same thing. But then the conjugate, because it's subtraction in the initial problem, the conjugate is going to be an addition sign in between these two. All right, now let's see where we go from here. We'll bring along our limit every single time until we get to plug in that 0. For our denominator, I'm going to suggest that we don't go and distribute that. Let's leave it as x multiplied by the square root of 5x plus 16 with a plus 4 hanging out next to it. However, in our numerator, let's go ahead and take our time and multiply this all out. So you can call it distributive property. You can say we're going to use FOIL. It's sometimes utilized for this, but we're going to go with the first terms, the square root of 5x plus 16, multiplied by another copy of 5x plus 16. So I'm going to go ahead and write that as squared because we have two copies of the same thing multiplied together. For our outer terms, I'm going to say square root of 5x plus 16 times positive 4. And I tend to write the number out in front. All right, for our inner terms, we have negative 4 times the square root of 5x plus 16. And for our last terms, we have negative 4 times positive 4, which will make negative 16. From here, as we think about simplifying down a little bit, you should notice that we're both adding and subtracting the same term. All right, we're adding 4 times the square root of 5x plus 16, and we're subtracting it. So we can combine those like radicals together, and they go away, or make 0 square root of 5x plus 16s. Other things we can do as we're simplifying is you'll notice at the beginning there we have a square root, and also that part is being squared. So those are inverse operations of one another. We can simplify that and make them go away. Everything else gets brought along from our numerator, as well as our denominator. We're really not doing anything with that. It's just kind of carrying along from step to step. But now as we think about further reducing the numerator, now that the square and the square root are gone, notice that we have some like terms. We're both adding 16 and subtracting 16 up in the numerator, so that allows us to get rid of those. It makes 0, and we're left with 5x as the only thing left in our numerator. For our denominator, we still have the x and the 5x plus 16 right now with the plus 4. So carry those along. But we've gotten to the point where we're in a good situation. That x in the denominator at the beginning caused us problems, but now we have 1 multiplied by the entire numerator and 1 multiplied by the entire denominator. So x over x will simplify, and you can say they go away, it makes a 1. All right, so what's left over besides that? Well, we still have our limit because we haven't evaluated it. As x approaches 0, we have 5 remaining in our numerator, the square root of 5x plus 16 with a plus 4 in our denominator. And we're to the point that we can go ahead and evaluate this by plugging 0 back in for our x. So at this point, we get 5 over the square root of 5 times 0, that's where we're evaluating, plus 16, with a plus 4 out here. So let's think about how that breaks down. Well, we end up with 0 times 5 makes 0 plus 16. So that's just 16 remaining underneath the radical. Bring along that plus 4. And from here, well, square root of 16 is 4. Bring along the plus 4. We end up with 5 over 8. So as we got to 5 over 8, that's a good place to be. We've completely evaluated this, and that's going to be the limit that we're looking for. So I hope this helps out as you're working on limits. Good luck.